Hi everyone, I'm Sosine and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about how I made a completely new, for me, type of gown. A Henrician gown, also known as a Tudor gown, or otherwise known as that dress that Anne Boleyn wears in her portrait. Really, it's a gown worn in England between 1530 and 1560, and I've long wanted one. We're talking years here. You can see it on many other people other than Anne Boleyn. Namely, you can also see Queen Elizabeth I wearing it in a painting of her as a young princess. It's also the one that inspired me personally. You can also see much of the construction of it in drawings by whalebone, and as far as I know, none of these are in existence today, so we kind of have to figure out how they were made by drawings and other research. To make mine, I read some books by the Tudor tailor, a series of books and patterns and research led by Jane Malcolm Davies and Nina McHale. Yes, that Nina from the amazing TV series A Stitch in Time, which by the way, you should totally watch after my video if you haven't yet. Honestly, I think much of this channel is inspired by that. Also, I highly recommend watching the Dressing a Queen series by Samantha Bullock on YouTube. She is better known on Instagram as Couture Courtesan. She has a wonderful series that I use as visual reference along with these books. So again, if you want to make this, definitely start with the patterns by Tudor Tailor. I'll link in my description, which I had to have shipped in, but was well worth it. If you want more detail on the construction, they have a book, The Tudor Tailor, Reconstructing 16th Century Dress, which also teaches about many other kinds of outfits as well, including menswear. However, I'll be making mine in the historically inaccurate manner and just focusing on making a really pretty dress in a way that maximizes prettiness, sturdiness, and time efficiency. Quick aside on historical accuracy. Some people I very much respect are scholars and do everything as historically accurate as possible. I very much respect that, since this is how we learn about a lot of historical construction, which can help us make a dress look more historically accurate. However, I myself do not consider someone who does historical reproduction and more of a textile artist and costumer who focuses on making historically inspired gowns or historically adequate dresses. I would love for my dresses to look not out of place in a painting from that era by having the right silhouette, but I would rather choose prettiness of ease of make than historical accuracy. So I really do lean towards the term historically adequate for myself, and I hope you understand that. So a lot of what you're gonna see is not historically accurate. Just so everyone knows the way that historical gown works, let's talk about the layers involved in wearing 1530s. First, you put on a shift, a simple garment that is worn close to the skin and is easily laundered to wick up sweat. This also protects the rest of the dress from your sweat. Then you put on a petticoat, then you put on the kirtle. This kirtle is the shapewear and is often boned or stiffened with linen buckram, which is a type of linen that has been stiffened with gum arabic. The top and bottom of this often has decorative fabric on it, but you can add a separate skirt cover so you can switch up the look of your outfits for the day. You can also add 4 sleeves that you can tie on, and you can switch out for different looks. Then you add the gown itself. Then the gown front is laced up and the lacing bits are covered with a panel that is pinned into place. Finally, you can turn the sleeves back to show the inside of the sleeve, which is often lined in fur. Then ideally you wear a cap of some sort, like a French hood. The cool part of all of this is that the jewels and decorations that you see on the paintings around the neckline, that's all on the kirtle, not on the gown. I just thought that was so cool because that means you can switch it all out. Anyways, let's start with the gown. I started by cutting out the Tudor tailor's pattern and making a mock-up in muslin. Since my kirtle wasn't ready yet, I decided to just bypass it and wear an 18th century stays instead to the fitting, since both periods rather emphasize a conical body shape. It worked relatively well and I had a mock-up for the gown, bodice, and the kirtle in no time. Now this project got pushed to the back burner for a while because I was working on a lot of things, namely like decorating this house and like changing jobs a lot. Also, I was working on like other projects. Eventually, I decided to restart it, and I was very happy with how quickly it progressed. Let's just take a moment to admire this beautiful fabric that I got from a website called Sartor Bohemia. They specialize in recreating historical fabrics. Some of them even are hand woven on a loom, like this one. This particular fabric is a reproduction of one of Eleanor of Toledo, who is honestly just such a cool historical person altogether. He is a Spanish nobleman who became a Duchess of Florence as the first wife of Cosimo de' Medici and often acted as regent and also guided his political decisions. You'll notice that the fabric of this gown is this beautiful white and black pattern decorated with metallic gold. An interesting fact is that this is a pomegranate design. Pomegranates in art at this time was a cheeky way of noting fertility, since pomegranates, as you know, have a lot of seeds inside. This famous painting is by Agnolo Bronzino, by the way, who is an incredible Mannerist painter. And this fabric itself has some scholarly debate, which I love. Some say that this gown never really existed and that Bronzino just invented the dress using a fabric swatch. Other people say that she did in fact own this dress and she loved it so much that she was buried in it. I think that it was proven that she wasn't, but still, it's a fun story. In any case, whether or not Eleanor of Toledo owned this dress or not, I do own this fabric. 8 meters, in fact. I had it for a while and honestly just spent hours staring at it initially, afraid to cut it, but I finally got over my fear one day and decided to do the thing. While I love Eleanor's fabric, I didn't love the cut of her dress. It seemed a little bulky and I wanted something that I thought would suit my body frame better. So I decided to make mine in the Henrician gown shape. After all, that painting is from 1545 and the pattern of the dress is popular from 1530 to 1560, so why not? It would fit into a painting from that era beautifully. So taking a deep breath, I started by cutting out the front and the back of the dress pieces. While I myself am not terribly fertile, I knew I wanted the pomegranate motif on the front and the back. The front was cut in one piece, so that was easy. For the back, I would have to carefully pattern match. Pattern match something like this, you have to start with the center back. So keep in mind when you're cutting out a pattern that there is seam allowance, so you have to take that 1/2 inch off all sides when you imagine the pieces together. Sometimes it helps to join the seams inward while pattern matching. Otherwise, draw a line where you know the design has to line up. To be sure, I always put a 1 inch margin on all sides of the pattern so that there is wiggle room in the pattern in case I didn't cut it out just perfectly. This turned out to be very useful and you can always trim this down later. So using this rule, I cut out all the pieces, albeit with a lot of waste. While everyone can construct their dress differently, I chose to use the 18th century method of making the bodice, mostly because I find that this way I can pattern match everything much more precisely than other methods. I don't plan on making a video about this dress, for instance, but come on, check out the pattern matching on the back. I'm so proud of it. The 18th century method is that you iron all the seam allowances in on all sides except for the bottom for each piece separately for both the lining and the exterior fashion fabric, and then put the wrong sides together. You then baste it together, and you do that for all the pieces of the back. Since you are cutting out the pattern pieces separately and then taking in all the seam allowances, this gives you a lot of time to figure out exactly where you want it. And you sew it together using the English stitch. Because you're choosing the exact seam allowance, you can iron the center back exactly as you want to, or each of the sides exactly as you want to, and make sure that the two pieces fit together perfectly before you sew it together by hand. I did that for the back and the side back pieces. I didn't take as much care for the side pieces, only that they were mirrored and they didn't look bad next to the main pomegranate in the back, thus taking away from the design itself. For the lining, I use a strong cotton twill to give the fabric some strength. You'll notice the actual fabric of the back has these 3 threads on it. They're such a pain in the butt because if you pull it out wrong, you can literally erode the whole fabric and design. I avoid it by simply cutting out the piece and then backing it with the lining as soon as possible before it has a chance to catch on anything, and I highly recommend you do the same. While they almost certainly didn't use whalebone, I did use synthetic whalebone as a boning for the front and the center back. The bottom edge of the bodice was originally left raw. To finish this, I folded it up by 1/2 inch seam allowance and sewed it down using whip stitches. I then covered it with Petersham ribbon and sewed it over to keep it clean and neat. I also added hand-sewn eyelets to the center front for spiral lacing. Row of eyelets were put in between 2 channels of boning to give it strength. This will eventually be covered by the front panel and won't be seen, so you'll notice that the front doesn't quite mirror up since I just used scraps. Funnily enough, we know that these dresses close like this from sketches done by Holbein. For the front panel, I started by getting a piece of coutil, which is a strong, non-stretchy fabric used often for corsets, and cutting out the design. I also used a thin piece of cotton. I then added in boning channels on multiple rows to give it strong stiffness. While the original probably used buckram, I do like the lightness and stiffness that boning gives. Again, historically adequate and not accurate. I then got the pretty outside fabric. I sewed these together on my Baby Lock Anthem and then turned it right side out. Now that the bodice of the dress was done, I had to add the skirt and sleeves. Around this time, my kid asked me to make his school costume, for which he had to have a 1780s court suit. So this got pushed aside for about 3 weeks while I made an entirely embroidered court suit for a 7-year-old, and then I started again. Now, let's get back to the sleeves. The sleeves are huge. I need to mention that this is in fact the small sleeve in the pattern kit. I cut 2 of these out and sewed them to the lining. It is a really cool trick where you can just have the outer fabric folded right sides together and the inner fabric folded right side together and pile them on top of each other. Then you sew all 4 layers together on a machine and you just turn it inside out and voila, it's done. I highly recommend starting 1 inch from the top and stopping 1 inch from the bottom of the seam so that you have some gap at the top and bottom for seam allowance. Then you can turn in the raw edges together and hem it. I then sewed it to the armholes. Please note that the armholes in this era are tight because the sleeve sits so close to the shoulder edge. However, because it sits so high up in the armpit, you do have better arm movement than a lot of other eras. For the skirt, I started by cutting out all those large panels. I usually hate wearing a train, but I felt it was necessary for this one, so I did it. It really does add to the majesty of the dress. Once each piece was cut out, I immediately flatlined it to a piece of silk taffeta. This again protected the fabric from getting pulled. I then sewed them together on my anthem, all of which took like 2 hours, which really isn't a lot of hours for the fact that this is a whole ass skirt. After the skirt was all sewn together, I have to hem it and finish all 4 sides before it gets sewn onto the bodice. This is just how skirts in this era are done according to Samantha Bullock. Thank you again. For the top edge, I just folded over the top 1/2 inch seam allowance on all sides and then pinned them, raw edges together, and then hand sewed it. For the bottom edge, I did something different than I normally do. This is the Samantha Bullock video method, and I've never seen it, but I really like it. You use a long piece of velvet about 5 inches wide. I sewed this right sides together, ironed it, folding over the velvet so that just a hint of the velvet shows on the outside edge. Then inside, the raw edges are folded over, and I put a strip of wool inside along the inside edge, and this gives the skirt weight and stiffness. I hand sewed the velvet edge down to just a silk taffeta, which made the outside clean and the inside clean as well. I also finished the front edges with velvet. I'd never done it like this before, and I don't know that I love it because it looks beautiful and it drapes wonderfully, but it's also so heavy. It was time to add the skirt to the bodice. I started by sewing the front edges of the skirt to the bodice at the center front, tilting it up at an angle to give it that characteristic upside down V shape. Really, I just followed the instructions for the Tudor tailor pattern for the fronts. Once it got to the back, the Tudor skirts do something really fun and exciting to give it that wonderful folded look. Basically, what you do is you pin the skirt to the back, and there are these big loops of fabric that do not get connected to the waist, just hang downwards. You sew the top of the skirt to the bodice using the strongest thread you can get your hands on, which for me is a double layer of 30 weight silk thread. But then those loops just hang free. This is lovely because you could get some wonderful folds in the back with a characteristic look. Fabric doesn't get to the bulk in the waist, so you don't get extra bulk where you don't want it. So again, full back, tiny waist. So for mine, I put in 7 pleats, and then the dress was done. This, of course, is just the outside portion. The inside portion, aka the kirtle, also had to be made. And again, the kirtle really acts as the corset, the stays, or the shapewear, if you will. So I cut out the lining portion out of coutil, which of course is about the stiffest fabric you can get. The fashion fabric at the top and the bottom, you'll notice that it doesn't have in the middle because it doesn't get shown. And I had a hard time choosing it. I kept going between black and white for the inside. I even ran a poll on my Instagram, and finally, just as I was going to pick white, I noticed that Sartor brought in a new gold fabric that was fully gold and decorated with a pomegranate motif. I thought it was the perfect contrast. I bought 3 yards on Monday and it was in my hands by Thursday. I cut out the bodice top and the skirt front out of it. I have some extra that I'm gonna use for the French hood. To stiffen the bodice, I did much the same thing that I did with the outer. I made a double layer of coutil and lightweight linen and put in a ton of boning channels. I don't know that this is historically accurate, but I do like the lightweightness of boning. I used 1/4 inch synthetic whalebone and put that into each channel. I then sewed on the decorative outer fabric. For the back closure, I wanted the outer fabric to not have visible eyelets, so I just put the eyelets on the coutil portion and sewed the fashion fabric to the top and the bottom, but not the center back. This leaves behind a gap where I can still lace up the back, and the fashion fabric will cover it up. Since most of the back will be covered by the gown itself, the gap will actually be nigh invisible, and honestly, I don't think you can even see it here. Finally, I cut out the skirt and lined it with a lightweight cotton. and sewed it to the waist in much the same way as the outside gown. I made the skirt a little shorter than the outside so that I wouldn't trip while I was wearing it. Now for the bottom hem, I did want to stiffen it so that it would flare out, but instead of doing it with velvet and wool, the kirtle was stiffened along the edge with some artificial horsehair stiffener made of plastic. Completely historically inaccurate, but so much lighter, and it really still did the job. And the dress was not done, but certainly ready for wearing. I was going to a friend's birthday party in Louisiana where the theme was 12 dancing shrimptresses, where we all are supposed to dress like medieval-inspired princesses. Granted, my dress is technically not medieval, since medieval ends at 15th century, and this is a decidedly 16th century dress. Hello, Gigi. Good girl. So I went ahead and wore this. Even though I'm missing a lot of the outfit, like the shift, the petticoat, the four sleeves, the decorations on the kirtle neckline, the fur lining on the sleeve, all of which I plan to remedy slowly, I thought the dress still turned out beautifully, and I enjoyed being the group photographer in costume, since it turns out I do own a professional camera, which you are looking through right now. Since I don't have a French hood yet, which is actually the headgear that Anne Boleyn wears in her portrait, I decided to go with what the Tudors TV show did in 2007 oh so cleverly. I wore a sparkly headband and called it a day. Overall, I love this dress. It's really heavy and it's so pretty, and I think it's honestly one of my favorite things I've ever made. The train is just so dramatic, and I love the fall of the fabric. And the fabric itself is so beautiful. I just think it's absolutely stunning. I'm still working on this outfit, so please follow along for the adventure by subscribing to the channel. What other periods and gowns do you want me to make? I was thinking either Titanic era. I'm definitely working on more 18th century. Let me know in the comments. I'm very much inspired by what you say. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.